Hey everyone, Stephanie here. Today I would like to share with you a Boneyard Abomination OTK deck that I've been playing with some success in the second beta season of Mythgard. If you've watched my duelist content, you will remember that I once made a video called playing a meme combo deck involving a one-turn kill with World Core Golem, and everything else in the deck is just sort of drawing toward the combo and making value trades and surviving on board. This deck has a rather similar concept, and there are actually many existing variants of it. I will just link to two below by other community members. The version that I'm playing, it's one that I've kind of arrived at through quite a bit of experimentation of my own. It ended up veering more towards the mid-range or tempo side than the control side. So the idea behind this kind of deck, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is that Boneyard Abomination is a card that gains +1/+1 for every minion in the Boneyard, which means every minion that has died over the course of the battle and has been sent to the Boneyard. Now there are ways to move minions out of the Boneyard back into your hand or to remove them from the game entirely, but then for the most part, most games when minions die, they tend to accumulate in the Boneyard. So then if it's a longer game, you can end up with 4 mana minion that has like 20 attack and 20 health or something crazy like that, and then you summon it and you combo it with either Volition, which is a 2 mana card that activates it right away and allows it to attack, or Dire Benediction, which is a 3 mana card that deals damage to the opposing player based on the minion strength and then locks that minion strength to 0. So it functions either as removal or as sort of a volition effect. And if you manage to pull off the entire combo, it can basically one-shot the opponent. So that was the initial idea, but then some games don't actually last that long because they're more fast-paced, or then there are also some decks that tech against this kind of strategy by including cards that can remove minions from the Boneyard. So I'm just gonna show you my version, talk through some of my card choices, and show you 2 replays with commentary. And yeah, I'm happy to hear from you guys what you think.
Alright, so let's take a look at the deck. I named it Growly because it has green, orange, and yellow, so I capitalized the GOY. For the path, I chose Turn of Seasons for the additional draw and a little bit of healing, and Mend for a little bit of healing as well. You can see the mana curve right here. I have 7 cards costing 1 mana. Actually, only 5 minions that cost 1 mana. 2 of the cards are Wake the Bones, which are normally used to bring back Parry of the Gates for additional draw. I sometimes also use it to re-summon Armageddon Angel, which destroys all minions. That's only for longer games. In terms of my ratio of minions to spells, I have a lot more minions than spells in this deck. You can see that I chose not to include Revelation of Zimek. I tried playing around with this card, but then I realized that spending 5 mana just to draw cards is a huge tempo loss, especially in the faster games, so that's why I took it out. And to compensate, I have Parry, I have Insurance Broker, which gains energy whenever minions die, and for 3 energy you can draw a card. I also have Xerxian Recruiter, which looks at the top card of the deck, and if it's a minion, you can draw it. So the reason why I have so few spells in this deck is to increase the chances of Recruiter recruiting. And then of course I have the Maze. So you can see that in terms of spells, I only have Volition, 2 Wonder Drug, 2 Misanthropia, 1 Wake the Bones, 1 Conviction, and 1 Dire Benediction. So depending on what cards I choose to hold in hand, I can have like an 80% or higher chance of drawing a minion with Recruiter. Some other spells that I chose to cut were Traitorous Murmur, which can be very powerful if you manage to steal something big, but most of the time I realized that this card just kind of clogs up your hand, especially in the faster games, so that's why I took it out. It really depends though, like This minion heavy deck is more for the current meta, where a lot of people seem to be running mid-rangey decks, and it's pretty important to contest the board early. If the meta ends up being a lot slower, then I can see Murmur and Zimek being more important. But yeah, from yellow, the control color, I have the healing to help stabilize. I have all these blight effects. And then from orange, which is the swarm faction, so to speak, I have all the draw and the recruiting effects. Then from green, we have our Boneyard Abomination, and then Born Again, which are the two main cards that are the most important from green. Gamayan is also pretty good because it's a solid body for 4 mana, and it can also allow you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck and choose one to put on top. So if you combo this with Recruiter, then you can guarantee your chances of drawing a minion. And yeah, that's basically it, so let's head into the replays. Alright, so this was actually a mirror sort of. It was against a slower version of this deck with just green and yellow, the control colors. You can see that I added in orange, which is a more mid-range color. So I burned my... let me just pause for a second. I burned my 6 mana, 3 yellow gem card that I was not going to be able to play early so that I could get 1 yellow gem, and then I played my Maze of Iatiku. Burn cards go back into your deck. This is a feature that's pretty unique to Mythgard. It means that based on what cards your opponent burns, you can sort of get a sense of what they're playing, and you can also judge whether they are able to play certain cards based on what gems they currently have. So my Maze of Iatiku is a 0/3 that can draw a card the next turn. Basically just cycles through the deck. And you can see that my opponent made a similar choice, burned a high costing card and played a 0/1 which draws a card. So here I draw a card of my Maze, and then I burned the 1 card in my hand that could give me a green gem, and I played a Born Again. Born Again is basically a 2/1 that can keep coming back from the Boneyard, similar to Snow Chaser in Duelist. Alright, so my opponent is just getting some bodies on the board and drawing cards. Here you can see that I got a combo piece, Dire Benediction, which I burned because I don't need it right away, and then I played my 4/4, which allows me to select the card I want to draw next. The cost of playing this card is that as long as it's on the board, you take 1 damage every time you draw a card. So here I've built up 1 gem of each color. My opponent has built up 2 yellow gems and 1 green gem, and they're gonna play their own Born Again. So here I drew 2 cards instead of 1 at the beginning of the turn because of my choice of path, which is Turn of Seasons. Turn of Seasons means that it cycles through 4 seasons, 1 season per round. So in spring, you heal for 1 health. In summer, your minions heal for 1 health. In the fall, you draw 2 cards. And in the winter, all of your minions take an additional damage. So I'm gonna draw another card of my 0/3, and it gets removed. Because each time you draw a card, it deducts 3 health, and it also gains 1 health at the beginning of each turn, but then I chose not to keep it on the board because I figured my opponent might be able to remove it pretty soon, so I wanted to get the value off of it before my opponent removes it. And then here I wanted to remove the blockers. So in Mythgard, the board component is that a minion can only attack either the lane directly in front of it or diagonally to the side. And you can see that my opponent blocked my 4/4 with the 2/1. So here I'm gonna play my Plague Maidens to ping everything for 1 damage. And then hit my opponent for 4. And that uses up all of my mana for the turn. And then my Born Again came back from the Boneyard. So here my opponent played Miso Libre, which stuns my 4/3 so it can't attack. And now we're in winter. You can see the little shield sign with the crack in the middle. That means that the minions take an additional damage. So here I played my Martycore, which can ping something for 2 damage, but because my opponent was also in winter, it was able to remove the 3/3. And here my opponent stunned my Plague Maidens to prevent the pinging, and also blocked my center 4/4. So here I hit for 4 and I removed the Born Again from the board, and then I decided to draw cards. Let me just explain my decision here for a second. So the alternative was to play the twins, but then because my opponent has 3 yellow gems at this moment and 5 mana, and I can't see their hand. Like I can see their hand in the replay, but I can't see it during the actual game. So I figured they might have Misanthropia, which is a 5 mana 3 yellow gem board wipe. So I decided to play some smaller bodies that they might be tempted to try and remove anyways. Let's see what happens. So Parry of the Gates is a very small body for 4 mana. It's a 2/2, but it draws 2 cards. It draws the top card from your deck, and then you can choose the second one. And then I played the Born Again. I should also explain here that my 0/3 has Lurker, which means that enemy minions have to attack another minion that is in their path before they can attack my 0/3. So the reason I played the 2/2 and the 2/1 in those lanes is so that I can protect my 0/3. So my opponent played Raid the Tombs, which removes the bottom 2 cards from their Boneyard and draws 2 cards. That's one of the cards that can tech against like a Boneyard strategy. And they stunned my 4/3 again. Okay, so here I hit for 4 and 2, and then I played my 7 mana card, the Iku Turso. So Iku Turso has Overrun, which means that if it sticks on the board, it can basically attack through the opposing lane, and any remaining damage will carry over to the opposing player. So in this case, the one thing that's blocking its path is the 3/1, which means that the 9 damage would carry over to my opponent. Another effect of Iku Turso was that the minion in the opposing lane becomes immobile and it can't move. It also can't attack because it gains the keyword Defender. So basically I'm threatening lethal the next turn unless my opponent answers this play. So my opponent played Detained on my Ifrit. Detained is a green spell that lowers an enemy minion's attack by 2, and then it adds a card to your hand which is Deported. For 2 mana and 2 green gems, you can bounce a minion on the board back to its owner's hand. So that's what my opponent did here to answer the Iku Turso. And then because you can see that there was nothing else blocking the 3/1's path, so it was able to attack and kill my 0/3. And I'm continuing to take the chip damage from having my Ifrit being alive and on the board. So here I got in for 6 attack, and then I played Zolea. Zolea is a 1/5 with 2 special abilities. One is that it can give a minion Blight 1, which means its stats decay by 1 attack and 1 health every turn until it dies. And then the other ability is that it can buff one of your minions for 3 attack. But in order to do those things, it has to have energy, which is the little lightning bolt sign you see at the bottom of the minion. So when it does the Blight 1 ability, then it gains 1 energy, and in order to do the 3 attack play, you have to have 2 energy. So here I'm applying Blight 1 to the 3/1 in order to remove it from the board, and then I just decided to be efficient with my mana and play a maze. Also because I knew that my opponent was likely to also have Boneyard Abomination, I decided to try and block all the lanes to make sure that they can't kill me. But as you can see in the replay, he doesn't actually have Boneyard Abomination in hand right now. So they're doing something very similar, trying to block as many lanes as possible. But instead, I actually had lethal in hand, because even though I didn't have Boneyard Abomination in hand, you can see that my opponent is only on 6 health right now, so I decided to add 3 damage from Zolea to my 4/4, and then play Dire Benediction on it to deal the 7 damage, and then I played the dancing emote because I was happy. This one was against a slower version of the popular red-orange deck. As you can see, my opponent chose Turn of Seasons instead of Journey of Souls. The reason why red-orange, while still a popular deck, has become a little bit slower these days is because purple is suddenly popular on the ladder with the January 31st update. So purple has access to one of the best anti-aggro cards, which is Red Cliffs. It shuts down rush minions. So my opponent is playing a more value-oriented version of the deck with fewer rush minions and more card draw. And they opened with Eager Recruit. You can see that my opening hand was not as good as last game. I had nothing to play on turn 1, so I basically just built up an orange gem, aiming to get Recruiter out on turn 2. My opponent fortunately didn't have a turn 2 play, so they just buffed their minion and hit me for 3. And here I played Recruiter and managed to recruit another recruit. I had 2 spells in hand, Wonder Drug and Volition, so that's why I decided to take the gamble and try to recruit a minion. Here you can see my opponent built up another orange gem and played Shadowvar Beast. So Shadowvar Beast is a defensive card. It's a 1/3 that causes the 3 minions in the 3 opposing lanes to have Fragile 1, which means they take an additional damage, and that's why the Eager Recruit was able to take out my 2/3. Alright, so pretty simple choice here. I burned the highest costing card and played another Recruiter. Didn't have any other play in hand. Unfortunately, I did not get a minion, even though I had 3 spells in hand. Like, the odds of that happening are like 20% or less, I believe. But that's just the way it is sometimes. So here the only 4 mana card I had was Parry of the Gates, which I played and drew 2 cards. The reason I played it on the left is because I knew that my opponent was playing a rather slow deck, so I wanted to get in some chip damage before they set up their value enchantments, because I don't have any anti-enchantment tech in this deck. So here, my opponent chose to build up a pretty big board in winter, which was really risky, and I decided to punish them for that choice. So I traded my 2/2 into the 2/5, and then I played my Plague Maidens, which pings everything, and I only pinged twice, but it basically is a 4 damage board clear because my opponent was in winter. And here they made a tempo play of their own, which is the Magmator. It puts a 3/3 body on the board and does 3 damage to everything in the opposing 3 lanes. So here I played Scion of Pride, which is basically just a 4/4. It also adds a transform spell into your hand, which can be used to transform something really big, but in this case I basically just wanted a body on the board because I had no other minion in hand other than my Boneyard Abomination. You can see that my opponent is running pretty low on cards. We can see in the replay that they have Melpomene Muse, which draws a card when it dies, But yeah, very fortunately for me, they didn't have their Parry of the Gates or like any of their draw engine early. So they decided to buff the Magmator and trade off with the Scion. And they played their Muse to try and draw some cards. So I gave them the card. And I had a little bit of a slow turn here because my hand just did not have that many minions. So I played my 2-1 and my Maze. My Boneyard Abomination, you can see in the hand right now, has 12 power, 13 now with the Maze and the Boneyard. And yeah, very fortunately for me, they didn't block the lane, so I was able to get the OTK kill. Anyway, I did run into this person twice, so let me just show you a little bit of the game that I lost against this person. So this is basically what happens when they do manage to set up the 2 enchantments. I'm gonna pause here. The one on the top left is called Stairway to Hades, and the one next to it is called To Heaven and Back. Basically, when something dies on the Stairway to Hades, it returns to play and gets Frenzy, which means it can attack twice per turn. When something dies on the Heaven enchantment, it returns to the owner's hand and gets buffed. So that's the value engine. And yeah, so you can see they set up the Muse and the Oak draws a card when it dies. It also has the effect that whenever it is on board and one of their minions dies, then they get to heal for 1 health and ping you for 1 damage. And they had a huge health advantage here. Here I actually made a miscalculation, so let me explain what I was trying to do. I played Conviction, which gives my minion Slayer 3, so it basically has 13 attack against a minion. And my intention was to power through the 2 health and hit twice for 20 damage and then detonate my minion with Dire Benediction to hit for 30 in total. And even taking into account the 2 healing, like it's enough to hit for 30, but I totally forgot in my calculation that the minion hits back. So my Eco Terso actually died. As you see, I played Volition and I was gonna detonate for the 10 damage, but it died to the counter attack. So that's why I said oops. And they were like, well played. And then after that I surrendered out of shame. Yeah, so I was like, I surrender. Anyway, that's what happens against the red-orange mid-range when they manage to get their enchantments going. But as you saw, I did manage to beat this person when I faced them again.
Do check out the links in the description below as well. I have a written version of this deck, and I will also be linking to similar decks by other community members. Hope you enjoyed this video.